Good evening. Just waiting for YouTube to confirm that we're live. Come on, YouTube, you can do it. Way. And yes, YouTube says that we're live. Excellent. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to episode 9 of Porting Gitflow to Golang live. And let me get the right slides up. There we go. Episode 9. We're almost a third of the way through the planned budget for this work. Almost a third of the way already. Isn't that something? And as you can see, hopefully, yes, there we go. I've changed the intro photo tonight. The season's definitely turning. Autumn's definitely on its way at last. We're broadcasting this just after mid-October. Welcome from Wales. What news this week from Wales? Well, on Friday, unfortunately, our local news remains dominated by the global pandemic. So Friday just gone, in Wales, our local government brought in new measures to ban people from highly infected areas travelling to Wales and importing the virus to us. That caused a few consternation. We've had devolved government for 20 years, so we've had a what used to be called the Welsh Assembly government, that's now known as the Welsh government, but we've had that for 20 years. But it's still causing, some political pundits and many political journalists are finding it difficult to understand that Wales has devolved government. So that's been fun. And then just this afternoon, it's been announced that from Friday, Wales is going back into full lockdown for 17 days through till Monday, 9th of November. What the government's doing is they're doing a circuit breaker. A short 2-week pause of everything in the hopes that it will stop the cases overwhelming our hospitals before flu season arrives and the winter pressures set in. They've said we'll definitely come out on Monday the 9th of November. They're not going to keep us in longer. Fingers crossed that's what happens. And then it'll be another week or two minimum after that before we start to see whether or not the circuit breaker has worked or not. So that's news from Wales. As always, if you're watching live or you're watching on catch up, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear where you're from, how you found the stream, and tell me a bit about news wherever you are. Love to hear what's going on in your part of the world or with you personally. Please do leave some news. I look forward to reading it. What are we on to tonight? Well, last week we made a start on the Git code, the Golang code, and we started sketching out the workspace abstraction. And during that we identified the repo abstraction was another thing we needed to build. And if I very quickly switched over to iPad cam, let me just wake the iPad up. Come on, there we go. So over here on iPad cam, we've got a picture of, one moment, my main screen's doing the Hall of Mirrors thing a bit. That's better. It's a bit distracting. Right. So, if we go to our architecture diagram, last week we made a start on this here, the workspaces, and through code and through working through the code we confirmed that these abstractions here, this local and remote workspaces, which I'm calling repos, also do make sense. And what we determined is that these are very much part of our Git abstraction layer, which is great. Now the other thing we were trying to do last week but failed to do was start to tease out our interfaces to describe the behaviors that the business logic was going to work with. We didn't manage to achieve any of that last week, but we did start to work out here our CQRS style business logic and our interface to that. So that's where we were last week. Let me just clean my diagram back up. And that leads us on to what we're doing tonight. Sure, I've got the right slides up. There we go. So tonight, what I'm looking to do, I made a decision that it's time for us to start driving out more of these design decisions by actually trying to make something work. And I thought we'd start with the init command, the git hf init command, and the non-interactive version of that, just to keep it simple. I don't expect to get that command compiling or working tonight. If we do, that's great, but that's an aspiration. It's not a goal for tonight. Just want to get started on it, and I'm mostly doing this at this stage to drive out more of the workspace abstraction and more of the repo abstraction that we started on last week. There's no two ways about it. Tackling it from the bottom up, I was definitely struggling a little bit with that. So I'm switching more to a top-down design tonight to try and drive some more of that detail out. And we'll see how we go. Now, in terms of time, sorry, device is buzzing. In terms of time, I think we're going to be about 2 hours tonight. We might run over a little bit, but 2 hours is pretty much what I'm aiming for with this tonight. Oh, hello, Matt. It's good to see you, sir. Right. Let's get straight into the code. Let's switch over to Linux Cam. Okay. So hopefully, let me just deal with the Hall of Mirrors again. There we go, that's better. Slightly less distracting. So what we've got on screen is a VS Code pretty much where we left it last week. The machine has been rebooted. I've just reopened VS Code and it's opened up pretty much where we left it. Haven't done anything to the code at all since the last live stream. What we're looking to do tonight is we've got our init command, and we want to try and get this working, or at least push it along tonight. That's what we're aiming to do. So the first thing I want to do is to actually tidy up the Cobra bits of it. A few live streams ago we went through and we built out the skeleton app so that it compiled and so that it had the right shape output for the screen. We put a lot of effort into taking Cobra apart and understanding how we could change the data we were passing to Cobra and find some useful flags like these, which we found by digging through Cobra. Oops. So that the binary, which should still be here. Let's have a look. So if I go into Gitflow here. So this is our Go extension compiled a couple of weeks ago. And what we've got is an output that's almost identical to the existing shell-based extension. And what we're going to do tonight is work on this a bit more, with the proviso that I'm probably not going to be able to get the code actually compiling tonight, which could limit some of what we want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this long section to start off with, just because it's bugging me. And what do we want to say? Because I don't think we've got long descriptions in the existing. Let me just pull up the existing shellcode a moment. Do we have any sort of long descriptions? I don't think we do. So I've gone back into the old shellcode here, and I'm just looking to see if we have any descriptions at all. I'm pretty certain we don't. No. Just shows the usage and exit. So we're on our own for this. And what do we want to say? So what we want to say here is something along the lines of So we want to say something along the lines of git hf init sets up your git repo, your existing git repo. We don't. I'm going to use the word existing. I might regret using the word existing, but I'm going to go with that for now. So that it's ready. It's ready to what? So it's ready to use the Gitflow branching model. We'll go with that. And I've hit what happened there, just to explain. When I saved the file, the Git tools automatically reformatted it and put all that white space in. That's a Git thing. Right. So we need to define our flags. And git hf init, if we scroll back up, has two flags, force and ask. So we need to add these here. Init command dot persistent flags. I don't know the difference between bool and bool p. I'm going to look at that in a moment. I'm literally going on. Aha! There we go. We've got a nice pop-up to help us. So it supports both short and long dashes. That's what it does. Very obvious from the name. So we're going to do the force flag. And do we have a help message here? I'm going to grab the existing help message, you see. We're going to chuck that in there. And persistent flags, bool p, and this is ask a. This is the This is the non-interactive one. I'm going to grab that. Ask for branch name and conventions. It would help if I put that in quotes. There we go. So those are our two flags. So we've initialized. If you're not familiar with Go, let me explain something here. There aren't many other languages that I use on a regular basis that work in quite the same way. In Go, every file, func init, is reserved, and it gets called when the binary first starts, so you can do initialization. So it's kind of a modular language style feature, but more emulated. It's not, Go's not really a modular language. It's more modular than an OO language would be, for sure, but I wouldn't call it a modular language. So what's happening then is when the binary first runs, init gets called everywhere. All these init functions get called, and so we register our command. And then on the command, we register the persistent flags that we want, force and ask. Now, I'm probably going to regret this. I'm going to try compiling. Ooh, I was expecting that to fail. I am surprised that it didn't. So if we do gitflow init minus help, what happens? We now get our new flags out. I'm still surprised this compiled. Shouldn't be. I figured out why, but I'm still a bit surprised. And now we get these flags. So H for help, F for force, and A for ask. And it shows you alternatives that are available as well. And we can probably go back into Cobra and change how these are presented a bit later on as well, but I'm not going to tackle that tonight. That's the kind of thing to come and tidy up later on. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on what the init command needs to do. Now there's two ways to do this. One thing we could do, and one thing most of us would do most of the time, is go back through the existing shell script code and pretty much copy it verbatim. Certainly sketch out pseudocode that looks very much like the existing shell code. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. But in general, what I prefer to do is to work off requirements. And way back when we first started these series of live streams, one of the first things we did was make a start on capturing the requirements for the Gitflow extension. And that's what should be up on the screen now. Now I'm just reading through these. I've not read these for a while. So I've just noticed there seems to be some duplication as well. These definitely need a bit more polishing from the last time we touched them. But this tells us how to measure whether the githf command is working or not. So it's a good idea to have written requirements that you can go through and just check against to see whether or not you're going to achieve them. So that's what I'm looking at the minute. The duplicate is 112 and 111 and 112 look identical to me. So I'm willing to bet that was release hotfix and support was what I was going to put down there, though we've agreed we're not doing the support branches. So I'm willing to bet that's what that is. The first thing we need to do, we say here it's going to initialize an existing Git repo. Well, we don't know if we're in an existing Git repo or not. So this is where we're going to start to break the code a bit. So what we want to do is we want to start importing some of the packages we created last week. And we created packages called Hubflow and Workspace. And Workspace has got some stuff in there that's probably going to get broken out into repo. So I'm going to import the Hubflow package. That's what I'm going to do. See, what we want to do here is we kind of want the commands to only deal with code in the Hubflow package. And we kind of want, the way to think of these commands is to think of them like controllers in a web application. We want them to be as thin as we can be, because we want to put as much of the logic as possible into our business logic layer, which is the Hubflow package. And that way, when we want to start building out an API, which is one of our stretch goals, which is looking a bit iffy for our 30-week budget for this work. But if we did get to that, or we decide to carry on with it, the more code that's in these Hubflow commands, the harder it is to build that API out, because we're starting to duplicate logic instead of just recall existing logic. Now the question is where to find the balance. For example, should we actually be calling, should there be in Hubflow, should there be something called init? For example, if we go into the Hubflow package here on the left, what have we got in here at the moment? We've got a Hubflow object, sorry, a Hubflow structure that we're attaching lots of methods to. Now, should we actually be using that or not? There's arguments both ways. But what we are going to do is we are going to remove this old code, say old code, and we are going to say we're going to initialize our Hubflow object. And you are complaining why? Let's have a look. Found packages workspace. So it is saying, because last week we were copying files around. It is saying that these have got the wrong package name because we never renamed them. That's package Hubflow, and that is package Hubflow. So that should fix that. So this gives us a new HF, and you're saying invalid type. Okay, is that going to make you happy? It has made you happy. Good. We're getting there. My Go's rusty. I'm only using Go at the minute during the live streams. I'm doing a lot of PHP and a little bit of TypeScript at the minute. And while I find I can switch between TypeScript and PHP very easily, PHP and Go has always been a challenge for me. I've always got to immerse myself in one or the other. If I'm doing both, just for some reason, I've always found those two languages difficult to switch with. I've been doing Go, Christ, 2013 I think was as the earliest, maybe 2012, but certainly by 2013 I was doing Go. Pretty sure it was 2013. And yet that's the two languages I just still, after 7 years, I still find it hard to switch between those languages at the drop of a hat. One of those things. But we'll see if it's working, because yes it is. So what we're going to do for now is we're going to sketch out our logic in here and then figure out how much to move into the Hubflow workspace. Actually, right, so let me do this. So the other thing I want to do is I don't like doing this in line like this. So we're going to move this down here. We should be able to get away with this. So that should just become running it. There we go. So yeah, that looks good. Right, so what I've done there is, instead of having like a lambda or a closure, an inline function. I shouldn't use the word inline. It means something different in system level languages to how I'm meaning it. So instead of having an anonymous function, there we go, we'll use that attached to the command. We've told it to come down and call our function here, and this just means we've got a bit more formatting. So if we're already initialized, we don't seem to return anything at the minute. We should probably call, we imported exit? Yes, we have. So that's imported the OS package for us, and we're just going to exit the process. Now what we do need to do, if we go back to our shell script, excuse me, if we're already initialized, what do we do in here? Come on. We exit 0, but we put out a warning. So warning's defined centrally. I'm guessing that goes, it'll be in the Hubflow code. One moment. It'll be defined in here almost certainly. Probably at the very top, yeah. So that goes to standard error. So we need to print a message to standard error. And we need to define the warn function for that. Oh, I forgot to pin. One moment, I forgot to pin the shell script code. Let me pin the shell script code. Come on, where's it gone? That's better. Let's move that over to the left so I don't lose it. And then let's move init.go over there. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to chuck that in there. We know it's a 0. And it doesn't matter for the minute that I've pasted some shell code into the Golang. I'm just going to comment it out so that we can compile if we want to. That's just a reminder for me that I need to create that capability. Now, we've got some flags to deal with. How do we process flags in Cobra? SPF 13/Cobra if memory serves. There we go, that was a good guess. Yes, accept your cookies yet again, GitHub. How do we accept? Working with flags, perfect. We assign them to a variable. I would prefer local. So we need to use the var version of the library. But reason I'm hesitating a bit is that, you know, how does bool p work without the var format? That's what I'm curious about. I mean, it exists, so it must be usable. So the question is how does that work? It doesn't seem to really tell us. Ah, it returns a pointer to the variable. It's alright, there's a reason I'm sighing is I'm being forced to do this, and I hate that I'm having to do this. I'm being forced to do this. I'll explain it in a moment. Let me just get this typed up. I'm sorry it's scrolling off the screen. I'll have a look at that in a moment. Can I get away with reformatting this like this so it's readable? All right. Good, it doesn't reflow it. That's good. Right, so the reason I'm sighing is what I've been forced to do is declare two variables at the file level scope, rather than actually declare them inside the function and then pass them around. And I'm sighing because I don't like having to do that. It's not the end of the world, truth be told. I'm not exporting these. Go rename still isn't working. That is going to be annoying, not being able to use the tools properly. But I'm going to fix that next week. For now, I'll just rename them. I'll go old school and just rename them by hand. So these variables, they're like global variables, but they only exist for code inside this file. They don't exist anywhere else. So I don't have to pass them in as parameters to the run init command, for example. I can simply, I simply declare them at the file level. Let's add a comment at least. Greenish. Force flag tracks whether we are going to ignore any existing Gitflow initialization. And then ask flag tracks whether or not going to ask the user for the branch names stroke prefixes. Excuse me. So what we can do now is I'm going to comment this out for the moment. What I'm going to do is just put a little bit of code here to show you. We're going to prove whether or not most flags are being set, just as a demonstration. And it should be format.f print f. That's not what I went for. Come on, give me f print f. os.standard out. Force flag is %v is the formatter if memory serves. And then we add in force flag. And we're going to do the same for the ask flag. So this is just proving that those variables get set. That's all we're doing. Now we could run this under a single step debugger, but given the tools are playing up a bit tonight, I don't want to risk that. So just build it. There we go. Now we're pulling in from another package. We're starting to get problems. So I'm going to comment that out for the moment. I've commented you out. I'm not importing you. Come on. '73 and line 80. It's complaining. What have I done? Is it just missing commas? Looks like it. Alright, it builds. So Gitflow init -- help. There we go. So even running the help command, we now jump into here. So the help flag effectively no longer works, which is interesting. Let me just stick a line break at the end. Reminds me so much of my C programming days. There we go, that's better. So both flags are false. So if we do -- force, Still false. That's not great. If we do minus F, still false. Minus A, still false. Right. So force flag and ask flag are not being initialized. So the question is why? In their examples, shouldn't be necessary. This shouldn't be necessary, but we're going to do it anyway. Got to keep the linter happy. So what was happening there very quickly is the first word of the comment above a definition has to be the definition. That's what Go expects, and that's enforced by the tools. So all I'm doing is making these, the reason I'm making them capitals is the casing is used to decide whether or not they're exported. There's no export keyword like we're used to in most other languages. It's done by convention. So we're going to see now whether or not this has fixed my problem. And it hasn't. So right now, these flags are not being correctly parsed. So let's look into this and see if we can figure out what I have overlooked. And the answer is probably, I probably just need to change it to be that. Instead of persistent flags, it should probably just be flags. So we'll try that. Nope, I didn't fix it either. This is when you're consuming open source libraries, especially ones you don't use on a regular basis, and that's certainly true for me with Cobra, because I don't build brand new tools every single day of the week. You run into things like this. And that's one of the reasons I decided to go and test the flags early on, because if there was a problem, I didn't want to get like 100 or 200 lines of code in and then find that things weren't working and have to figure out why. It's better to make small changes and test it as you go along and iterate. So what I need to do now is figure out why this is playing up. I say playing up, the mistake is almost certainly mine, but I just don't, at the minute I don't know why it is failing. I don't know what mistake I have made. So I am currently going through the documentation. No, it's just say persist flags. So what's the difference? Virus Viper. So persistent, here we go. Persistent means it automatically cascades down to all child commands. And so the example they give is you set persistent flags on the root object, because those are global flags. You'd put those on the root object using persistent flags. That's what it means by that. Now local flags, so using non-persistent flags, just flags. Why the course can't call it global flags and parent flags is, and local flags is beyond me. But anyway, they only appear locally. Local flags only appear locally. That's a silly statement. They're unique only to the specific command. So in our case, we don't want to use persistent because we have no child commands. These flags, the force flag and the ask flag, only exist on the init command, and there's no subcommands of init. So that's good. That makes sense. But the question is, why are the flags not being parsed? Is it down to these variables? We added these variables to get our output, our help output, to appear correctly. Let's have a play with this. Am I going to regret turning this off? Well, my flag now works. So that's good. So that's what the fault was. Is I disabled flag parsing. Now I have to remember why. And the easiest way to do that is to go up here and do a search. Just checking there's nowhere else to search. Disable flag parsing. Why did I switch that off? So all flags will... Oh, I remember why I switched it off. Right. So I switched off flag parsing so that we could pass all the flags through to the shell script, because all of these commands are stubs. If we're going to feature cancel, for example, it's a stub, and we pass whatever is on the command line through to the underlying shell scripts, the existing Gitflow extension. So as we build these out, we need to disable flag parsing. We need to get rid of that. Excuse me. So that now the Golang code is in charge. So let me just go back to my terminal. I'm just going to do another build. I'm going to make sure everything works the way we want one more time. That was silly of me. Force minus ask, and with no flags. There we go. Right, we're in business. So that's something I've got to remember as I build out all the other commands. So does this mean we can now test? Do I no longer have to export these variables, because I don't want anything else seeing them at all. It's bad enough there at file level, although I accept the convenience that it brings. And I'm relying, you can probably barely see, in fact you can't see it because my ugly mug's in the way. Let me turn my cam off for the moment. Right down here on the left hand side, sorry, right hand side, the other left, is telling me there's little red markers that are popping up as I'm renaming these variables to remind me of everywhere else I've forgotten to do it. There we go, I'm back now. So if I do another build, and I do an ask, that's still working. That's still working. And no flags is still working. Good. So that's good. So what we've proven here is, while I've got to have these variables at the file level, there's just no other way that I can quickly think of to make that work. On the plus side, I don't have to export them outside the scope of this file. I can live with that. But I probably want to tidy this up a bit more. So what I want to do, can I do this? So I want a helpers package. I have a helpers package already. That wouldn't work. What I was going to do is see if I could define a structure for flags and put it in the helpers package, but that won't make any sense. So what I want to do is something like this. Bear with me, I'm trying to remember the syntax for this, which is going to be the main thing that slows me down tonight, is forgetting syntax. Type. That's what I want. So we want type local flags struct. And we want to move force flag and ask flag into here, just to tidy it up. I'm in alphabetical order because the ordering does not matter. And then what we will do, we will create a variable of, just call it flags. And you're going to tell me, because it's a var, I don't need to do that. And then now I can do flags.forceFlag, flags.askFlag. I'll explain this a bit more in a moment. Let me just get this done. Right. So what I've done is I've created a type to hold our flags. I've just sorted them in alphabetical order because for what we're doing here, the order of fields in the structure don't matter. It's not important. What's important is I want to reduce the pollution of our scope. And I use the word pollution very deliberately. Right. I'm just adding some comments in here because it's good practice to comment as you go. You can't write too many comments. You can certainly write the wrong comments that create clutter because they are noise. But you certainly don't. This idea that the code is the documentation, it's bollocks. I'm sorry, it's utter bollocks. If you're good enough, you can take code apart and understand what. If you're good enough. You can never understand why just from reading the code. I've been doing software archaeology since 1994, and I still rely on documentation or going to ask people to understand why uncommented code works the way it is. It's one of those things. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding comments as we go along just to make sure things are kept tidy. So by sticking them all in one variable, if we come down here to our run command, instead of force flag and ask flag being two global variables polluting on our scope, they're now properties or members, or whatever the right term is in Go. Could even be attributes. I'm going to go with attributes for now. I should really look that up and see what the right term is. But these are now attributes of the flags variable. So we've just got one variable polluting our scope, which is flags. So we've reduced that surface area, which therefore reduces collisions and other problems. And it just looks tidier. And in fact, what we can do now, we don't need to call them ask flag and force flag. We can just call them ask and force. Because we've now got context by the fact they belong to the flags variable. There we go. Force and ask. And because we've got the variable name as context, flags.force and flags.ask, that's perfectly readable. Someone who is not used to this code can still come along, they can read this code and make sense of it fairly quickly. That's not going to be a problem. And now we've got this, we can take it out. Now we've proved it works. And the whole reason for adding this was so that if we're bailing early, we can do so straight away. If we're already initialized, but we don't have the force flag set, we can bail straight away. That's the whole point of that, is getting those flags working. Now, one thing that we do in the existing code, remember, we're going for as close to 100% compatibility as we can. We're only going to break compatibility if we run into something that just is a total head scratcher. And from the several passes we've made of the code, I think we've run out of head scratchers. So if we're not in a Git repo, we're going to initialize it. Oops. So we want to express that here in code somehow. And to do that, we need a workspace. So as well as up here importing the Hubflow package, we need to import the workspace package. Oh, it knows I'm not using workspace, you see, yet, so it automatically deletes it. So we're going to leave that up there for the moment. There's no point in initializing a workspace until we need it. So workspace. Dot workspace for now. Right. Is that going to cause a clash? I'm going to assume that I can't call a variable the same name as a package I've imported. Maybe you can get away with it in Golang because its parser's pretty good, but in most languages that would cause problems. So I'm going to go with WS. And I've just added a comment to say that WS is how we interact with the Git repos, both local and remote. And I'm going to add a comment above HF to say is probably not going to survive, is how we interact with shared business logic, even though we're not really doing that yet. And so what we want to say here is if not ws dot is git repo. Now, the reason I'm hesitating is how does the workspace know where to look? It needs a root folder. It needs a root folder. That I believe is available on OS. Is it current working directory? No, it is not. How about get working directory by the looks of it? Returns a rooted path name according to the current directory. Okay. I can live with that. So that's getting the current working directory. And we're going to add that to our workspace. So over here in workspace, We've got remote name, which we're going to think about another time. But we've got root dir string. Now this is an area where it makes sense to store data. If you think of Workspace as a context, if you think of it as a context, we want to be able to tell it where our root folder is. Now, arguably, that's a property of the local repo rather than the root dir. Arguably. But we're going to leave it in Workspace for now, and then we'll move it as we build it out. We're very much exploring. Sorry, I'm making gestures with my hands. I'm sorry, you can't see it. We are very much exploring this bit by bit and trying to find the right shape. So, and what we want to say, we want to get the local. If it is a Git repo, if it's not a Git repo, we want to initialize that repo. It doesn't matter that right now these don't exist. We're just sketching this out. We're just sketching this out. And what we're saying here is if it is initialized, we want to make sure we're allowed to be why are we allowed to be headless? Sorry, I'm just having to think about that. Require clean working tree is fair enough, but why is headless allowed? Why would we initialize somewhere that's in a headless state? Because the reason is because remember later on we actually go and create head if it doesn't exist. That must be the reason why. That must be the reason why. So what we're saying here is headless, or we want to require clean workspace. It says clean working tree. We'll just stick with that. Clean working tree. So already I'm starting to pretty much verbatim copy the shell script logic across for now. Then in the shell script we check to see if we're initialized. I'm guessing that's to reduce complications. I'm going to leave it in this order for now. Deliberately reverse the order of that. And then it looks like we're going to have to define the the warn function sooner rather than later. I am going to kick that down the road for now. We are just going to do an f os.standard error. Using default branch names. I'm just going to do that. That's what we're going to do. And it goes away and determines what origin is. Because if there is no origin, we bail. So that's right. I'm already feeling the structure of this code. I'm already in two minds about whether or not how happy I am with it. We'll carry on for now. I'm not sure how much this is going to survive once we start trying to make it actually execute, but we'll carry on for now. Wrong one. Go over here. So we need to go and find the remote. So origin ws dot determine origin. Now let's stick that on Hubflow. HF dot. So there's a load of stuff on HF that we want to move out at the moment. Require remote available, but that's just helpers. So HF is kind of turning a bit more into a helper library at the minute. Determine origin, and we'll pass it WS in to that. Origin error. We'll get an error back, and if error, which means we've not been able to determine origin, that's when we'll bail. Sorry, I keep alt tabbing by mistake. And we'll grab these. It would speed life up if warn existed as a function. So I'm just going to do that now. Package helpers. Grab this just to speed things up. New file warn.go. Func warn. And what we want to do we want to make it a form of a printf function? Yes, we do. os dot fprintf. And its signature is, because we're going to steal that. No, it's not OS, it's format. Come on. So we want, I'm stealing its signature, format string, and then we've got a load of interfaces. So we want format. So we want format is string, and then a interface is a placeholder for pretty much anything. If the reason it's complaining is os.standard error format a and you're now complaining at me why. Missing function body, because that's got to be on the following line. And now you are complaining why. What have I done that's silly? Format of type string. One moment. Yeah, that's not wrong. What have I done? Is it because I've done interface like that? Unexpected interface. Let me look this up. Maybe quicker. So we go to Golang.org. Then we go to packages. And we scroll down to F for format. And we scroll down here. Come on. It's a lot of preamble. fprintf. And here's a neat thing. If you want to see how part of the standard library is implemented, you go and find it on golang.org's documentation. You come down to the godoc, the dot block if you like, for that function. And if you click the function name, here's a neat trick. It takes you to the code. Takes you straight to the code. Isn't that handy? It also tells me what I was doing wrong. No, it says I can't unpack A here. You're going to be a pain? Joys of spread operators. Most decent languages, decent's the wrong word. Most languages that are continuing to evolve have added rest and spread operators of various forms. That's what these three dots are. But they're all subtly different in their syntax. But anyway, I need to export this. There we go. And I want to make one more check. I want to go find the shellcode and make sure there's no prefix that we output in front of this. No, we don't. We just output whatever we've been given to standard error. So this will do the trick. So now what I can do is all of the existing text that we copy across from the shell script, we just output it straight to standard error. And then the exit becomes os.exit one. That's pretty good. Pretty happy with that. Which means these up here that I commented out earlier, I can now get them. I can now uncomment them and make them work. And the only other thing I've got to do is add the import, because it hasn't the tools haven't automatically added it. Helpers, I think, hasn't complained, so I probably have to do. Do I have to do it that way? Yes, I do. Helpers.1. I'm sure there's a way to import them without having to have the prefix. But you know what? I can live with that. It's not the end of the world. Helpers.1. There we go. So the question, I suppose, could be is why didn't I create one, about half an hour ago when I first had the need for it? And it is a good question. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to make some progress. I wanted to make some headway, because half an hour ago I wasn't sure whether I wanted to really copy the shellcode verbatim across or not. As we're going along, it's becoming apparent that one way we can translate the code across is to very closely mimic the shell script structure. This all needs refactoring. I am not happy with this, but we have a starting point, and now that we're making some progress, it felt right to go back and make that helper work. So that's my thinking there. So if we go back here, so this is just working out which origin to use. We're going to hide that in some logic. Then defines a global variable called origin. Yeah, we're going to skip that. Then we put out a message. We say which origin we're using as the remote for all tracking branches. And then we start getting into the config and working out whether we should be asking people or not. Now, how do we want to do that here? Creating the Hubflow object will automatically initialize it. And if we move this down here to after the workspace has definitely been created, then we could argue that as part of creating the Hubflow object, it should go and load the config we want. We could argue. So if we go and grab Hubflow. Now then, with Golang, how do we do that? Do we stick an explicit initializer on it? So constructor for struct. You can do constructor like factories. And if memory serves, the convention is you stick the word new in front of it. So what we would do is we would export a function. Do we need one? So here's another question. Just bear in mind, the reason we're doing this top down is we're trying to drive out whether or not we need these abstractions. And there's two reasons to have a structure like Hubflow. One is to hold state, one is to hold data, and the other one is to be described via interfaces. And I don't think we have much of that. There is some state, and that's to do with the git config. Whether that should be persistent state or not is open for debate. Persistent state can be a bit of an optimization, but you've also got to be careful that you don't make your code non-deterministic in the process. You've got to be careful with that. But in terms of interfaces, let's have a look. Let's have a look at what we've got. I mean, not all these are going to survive anyway. I think these are all functions that we should export. I think each of these is a function. Just like we created require branch and require clean working tree. I think we should be grabbing these and taking everything that's currently in Hubflow and turning it into a standalone function. I don't think they are methods. It makes it easier to extend. Now the one hesitation I do have is there is some state to do with our branches. And the question is whether or not that state needs to be passed to these commands. For now I'm going to assume not. If we need state, we can refactor again later on. But I would rather try and get rid of state than try and accommodate it. So I'm going to go down here and we're just start. What I'm going to do, so I'm pointing at the screen again. I'm going to start at the bottom of these methods that we've added to the Hubflow struct. I'm going to turn them into standalone functions. I'm going to move them out. I'm not going to do anything useful. And they're going to take our workspace as the parameter. And we're just going to stick a placeholder comment at the top just to keep the linter happy. That's all we're going to do. So that's require Hubflow initialized, so that can go. Require remote available. Oh, sorry, I created a folder when I meant to create a file. I really wish... My phone's buzzing. I really wish there was a way in VS Code that you could just click on something, make an empty folder and say convert to file. It would save me so much time. The amount of times I've meant to create a folder and have created a file instead. Sorry, create a file and create a folder instead. This is require remote available. And again, we're going to put a placeholder comment at the top. Remote available TBD. There we go. So that one's gone. Required bases on develop. That is certainly going to get renamed at some point. We're trying to remove the terms master and develop, at least from the code base. But it's something we'll come back to. We don't need to fix everything in one go. Require git repo. And these are all prefixed, the source code's all prefixed with guarantee, because these are going to exit if they're not happy. But they're not just going to call OS exit. There's I was going to say a trick. That's not what I mean. We're going to build a way for these functions to be told how to bail if they're unhappy. Right, has new version available. This is a query. So it gets a different file name prefix. Has new version available. Doesn't need a workspace, that can go. Has new version available to be done. Right then. Get latest version number. Query. Get latest version number. Now as an argument, at the minute I'm dumping all of these in one folder, so it's a flat structure. Get latest version number. I don't like using get for something for this. I'll explain that in a moment. Get latest version number to be done. Again, we don't care about the workspace because that's to do with the binary. For me, anything that's prefixed with the word get implies a cheap operation, and I don't like that. I think when you're picking the verb to use at the start of a function name or a method name, I think you need to think about the language you use to imply cost. So get and set, for example, imply no cost or very low cost. Whereas this is going to be going and making a request over to GitHub. That has cost. So I'm going to call this retrieve rather than get, because I think that does a better job of implying there's a cost. Retrieve sounds like it's got to go somewhere and get information. That's what retrieve sounds like. So I'm going with that, at least for now. And then we've got here, push latest changes to origin. So this is an action. And what we're starting to do here, this one will definitely need a workspace as a parameter. What we're starting to build here is a language that describes what we do. And this is the language that our commands, the Cobra commands that we're implementing, like Init, and also the API that we eventually build. This is the language that those tools, those types of controllers, will be written in. It's not really a domain-specific language because it's not defining its own syntax or anything. I think DSLs really should have their own syntax, or you should be able to write something using those terms in a way that doesn't look like you're writing the underlying programming language, which by all accounts Ruby is amazing for. I haven't used Ruby since 2008, so my knowledge of Ruby is all gone. There we go. Fetch latest changes from origin is our next file. And that definitely is a workspace. And as an argument, it should actually take the remote repo. But for now, everything at Hubflow is going to be talking to the workspace. And so the idea is that we hide local and remote from everything else. We wrap it, is what I want to do. So only the Hubflow package actually knows whether it's talking to a local or remote repo abstraction. Yes, I like that. Local merge helper. Action. Local merge helper. This is a very bad name for a function. Local merge helper. It almost certainly isn't going to survive in that intact. But it's a good name for a structure. But there's no verb. It doesn't start with a verb. It doesn't say. It's not written to say what it does. I mean, local merge helper. You can guess what it does. Of course, you can. But in terms of language, it's not very good. I'm pretty certain the local and remote merge helpers will end up somewhere else. But for now, they can live over here. To be done. Just got to stop it complaining. There we go. And then we've got change branch. Now this might seem overkill. change branch is something that we could let, is a part of our abstraction we could let leak out. Our workspace abstraction. We could let our commands and our API controllers call change branch directly. Arguably. Is there a reason to turn that into a standalone action? For now, I'm going to say yes. Because we might want to wrap it with logic, don't know. We can always get rid of it later on. But for now, let's assume we need it out here. And we can move it away later. We can move it somewhere else later on. I'm just going to deal with the fact that required branch has no comment at the top of it. So it's turning up in yellow on my list. There we go. And oh, I can't type. So a typo, a spelling mistake, it still stays yellow. Right, that's gone. I just cleans my list up on my list of files on the left-hand side. So new file, action, load settings. Yeah, see, that's state related. That's state related. I don't know. Oh, we'll go with it for now. We'll go with it for now. But that may not survive. That may well not survive. To be done. Lots to be done, that's for sure. Is it? Well, see, we've only got 4 left to extract. So this is a query. Is hub flow initialized? So is hub flow initialized? Let's clean the comment up. Is hub flow initialized? To be done, and we are going to return true. And we return a boolean, and we're going to return true for now. And we'll build that out as we go along. Ideally, what we want is to each of these stubs to throw to quit with an error saying that they've not yet been implemented. That would help us catch embarrassing mistakes. I might do that in a minute. Has prefix configured. See, again, these are questions about state. So there's a strong temptation to make them methods of the hub flow struct. I'm not going to do that. I am going to resist. Has prefixes configured. Oh, something else I want to do as well. This isn't currently in our requirements because I need to go back and finish all of those. Has prefixes configured. Is I want to make it possible for you to, the Hubflow extension, to have feature branches with no prefix, so you don't have the feature prefix. And yes, I need that for the day job. Absolutely do. But it is a pattern that people do, and it's one I think we should support. If it makes, one of the reasons for that is it makes integration with things like Jira a little easier. And while I wish Jira would go and die in a fire, because it's horrible, it is, you have to bow to reality and say that these systems exist, they're not going away. I mean, startup land is littered with people who try to compete with Jira. I mean, Christ, back in 2009, 2010, there were over 300 startups competing with Jira. A decade later, Jira's still here. I bet you most of those 300 startups aren't. Now, I don't think that says positive things about Jira. Not by any means. Sorry, I was hesitating as whether I wanted to rename this function. Has develop configured. I mean, has versus is for a start. Configured to be done. But also getting rid of the language of develop and master. But we're going to fix those as we go along. Query has master configured.go. We're almost there. Has master configured. Right then. So that means we have shrunk our struct down to currently having nothing inside it. It's empty. It's an empty data structure. So we can start to build it out with some state over time as we need that state. For example, as we load the config, it could go into a Hubflow structure, and then we can pass that into our queries and our actions as needed in order to drive things forward. Out of curiosity, I'm just going to try compiling the code just to see how badly broken it is. So our workspace actions are currently not compiling. Oh yes, I wanted to do return an array and unpack it all. I'm going to comment that out for the minute. I've got to go through and do all this. You know what? It would be helpful for us if this code compiled, even if it doesn't do anything. So let's do that now. So I'm just going to go through and turn yellow, which is on the. So here's the thought: if you're colorblind, you may not actually be able to see what's going on. So my left hand panel in VS Code, the file names change color depending on what the Go tools are saying about the state of the code inside them. Green means that they're new, they're not yet been committed to Git. This dark yellow, which you may not see, I don't have color blindness, so I don't understand the restrictions. But it turns dark yellow if the linter's throwing warnings and errors, and then it turns red if the compiler returns a warning or an error. So what I'm just going to go through is very quickly go through all of these and make sure they will compile, just so it can speed up our creative process a bit. So it's a little bit of housekeeping we've got to do. And ideally what I probably need is some sort of stub generator to speed this up. I don't have one for Go. If there's an argument, it's worth writing one. I'm going to leave that for another day. Because honestly, once we've got some of these going, this is a one-off piece of work. And now what are you complaining about? Invalid type. Okay, so basically the code I sketched out last week for get all branches, we're a long way from being able to make that actually work. So let's just comment it out for today. We're not committing any of this code. So we're okay there. Release branch. So rebase branch even. Rebasing. Oh. I get the appeal of rebasing. Okay, why are you unhappy? Undefined repo. We haven't imported repo from anywhere. Because it's called repo with a capital R. Now you're happy. Good. One thing with VS Code is they do their best with the pop-ups, but by God do they get in the way at times. But there again, that happens in most of the tools I've used. That's the local workspace. Now with this, we do want these to be methods because we definitely want repos. So local is a type of repo. We definitely want repos to have interfaces. There's an abstraction representing, local is an abstraction representing the local files checked out of get branches to be done, get tags to be done, is headless to be done. So I'm just going through and adding comments to keep the linter happy. Is branch merged into to be done. That might have to come out. Pull and rebase to be done. I want to split those up. Get commit, can't type. Get commit hash for branch to be done. Is branch pointing at tag to be done. Yeah, start a comment. Get short commit hash to be done. Now you might be watching this and wondering, why am I typing everything? Why don't I just copy and paste? I could just click on the name, copy. Yeah, what I could do, for example, select, copy here, start comment, paste, to be done. It's faster. It's definitely faster. Here's the thing, if you don't practice your typing, you're always going to be crap at it. You're always going to be slow at it. Excuse me. And whether we like it or not, typing remains a major function, a major mechanical skill that you need as a developer. Back in the 80s, people were trying to get rid of this with visual building tools. One day they will succeed. They haven't yet. So the reason I type everything and try to avoid copying stuff is I'm practicing my typing. Or if you prefer, I'm preserving the typing I've already got. It's a maintenance activity as well. Now, why are you throwing an error? Missing. Oh, it's because it's meant to return a string. Return no such branch. We'll just put a dummy in there for now. Get remotes. Get remotes to be done. And yeah, while it might seem slow, return false, nil. We don't need to return an error there. Just imagine how much slower I would be at my job if I couldn't type. So while typing may speed up this particular activity, sorry, not typing, copy and paste might speed up this particular activity. Overall, it really wouldn't speed things up very much, because I'd be sacrificing one skill for a short-term gain. And after doing this for 20 odd years, I don't want to sacrifice those skills. Represents a Git repo hosted somewhere else. We'll call it that. Because after I've been doing this 25 years, and I'm not the oldest person in the room all the time, but I'm the oldest person in the room more often than not. And part of that longevity is first principles. So you see me here on the live stream. I'm not pretending I'm on top of my Go. I'm having to look up syntax all the time. I've had to comment some code out tonight on multiple occasions because I couldn't remember the syntax and wanted to come back to it when I was ready. But I've got first principles. So I can still make progress by knowing what I need to be able to go and look up. It makes a big difference. And as the weeks go by, and as we get more code written, the Golang code and syntax and approaches will start to stick again. I'll be refreshing my memory, if you like. Now then, we have an interface. So we've got repo, but repo is an abstraction. It represents both local and remote. So instead of it being a structure now, it can become an interface that our local and remote structs can now implement. Although we're going to have a lot to add. So I am now going to switch over to Golang. Interface. Jump back into the documentation. In this case, I'm not looking at official documentation. I'm looking at Golang Go by example, which I don't think is official. And I'm just going to check. So type, name, word interface where we put struct before. And then you put function names with brackets and their return types. That's what we do. So that's what we'll do. So this is all tags. It's headless. Now there's a reason I'm not actually deleting these. I'm going to split my view a moment. So let's get rid of the file view. And we want to split. We'll split right. It's fine because we scroll independently. I'll show you why I'm not deleting these yet in a moment, because the obvious thing to do as I add them to the interface would be to delete these standalone functions. There's a good reason not to yet. And see if you can guess what it is it's going to take me a couple of minutes to bring all these across and add them to the interface. Branch exists. Tag exists. And while I'm doing this, you've got a couple of minutes in the comments or on the live stream chat if you prefer, if you're watching this live, to see if you can guess why I'm not deleting these yet. They are going to get deleted. Is branch merged into list branches of type, but I'm deliberately not deleting them straight away. They've got another use yet before we get rid of them. Resolve name prefix. Require branch. No, that's not going there. We're not having requirements inside that interface. So that's something else to consider. Create branch. Push ref to origin. That doesn't belong there either. Diff branches. Now this is where our workspace comes in. We'll leave that for now, but I'm not happy about that being part of the repo. If I merge base, pull and rebase, I don't like that. I don't like push tags. Create head. No, again, that doesn't belong in there. Prune. Prune doesn't belong in there. And the reason it doesn't, and the reason I've kept all of these, let's see if you guessed it, is these with a bit of adjustment, are the methods that local and remote need to define. So I want to dump them in here. There's going to be some duplicates. And then I'm going to, everywhere it says repo there, I'm going to do a Control H, Control H, and we are going to search, I'm going to change that to L star local. This is going to throw some errors up. Should have done anyway, because there should be some duplicates in here. But it hasn't. Now the one thing I should have done, it has thrown some errors. There are some, you can, oh, I've just realised. So I'm just looking at the screen where the feed's being put, and you can just make out these dots down the side of the screen. I've just left enough space for it, completely by coincidence. What I should have done is add the comments as well at the top of these. So is headless, is that a duplicate? Yes it is. Let's get rid of that. Branch exists is not a duplicate at the minute, so branch exists to be done. Tag exists. Tag exists to be done. Compare branches to be done. Kinda. That's a workspace operation. Right. Let's start moving stuff around. Stuff that doesn't belong on the repo, I'm going to move. So compare branches is a workspace action. Action compare branches dot go. I'm going to grab one of these that exists, chuck it in here. Compare branches, and same here. Compare branches. So one thing you'll see me do, and I want a workspace for that, not a repo. Workspace. You will see me use the mouse to select things that I want to delete, rather than faff about moving the cursor to the right place and then hitting delete lots. So I'll do that as an optimization. I will do that. Right then, let's just make some space. So compare branches can go. Is branch merged into? That's okay. I want to keep that. To be done. You a duplicate. So I can go. List branches of type we want to keep. Now, these may not stay as on interfaces. These may disappear. We may move these all into the CQRS style logic. We'll have to see. Resolve name prefix to be done. Require branch. I don't want that in there. Require branch absent. These are guarantees. So we've got require branch already. So that can go. Require branch absent. We need to do something about. So let's grab require branch and make a copy of it. New file. Guarantee require branch absent. So require branch absent. There we go. I'll get rid of those. So that can go. So we've got require tag absent. So we're going to do the same with that. We're going to turn that into a guarantee. We don't have it yet. So grab something, copy it. New file. Guarantee require tag absent.go. So require branch becomes require tag absent. There we go. We've done that one. You can go away. You're in my copy and paste buffer. No, you're not. You should be in my copy and paste buffer, so you should be okay. Require branches equal. That is another workspace. We actually don't have any guarantees on the workspace. Guarantees belong higher up. Guarantee require branches equal. I say they belong further up. Require branches equal. Require branches equal to be done. So that can go. Create branch needs to be done. Create branch to be done. Push ref to origin. We'll keep it on local for now. Diff branches, that's a workspace action. That is a workspace action, so we're going to do that. Action diff branches. Thing is, we could be diffing local and remote branches, you see. That's why it doesn't belong on a repo. That's why it doesn't belong there, so we're moving that off. Diff branches is gone. Find merge base we are keeping. Find merge base to be done. Pull and rebase. We've got rebase branch. We haven't got a pull action yet. Kind of is a local operation. We've already got it. We're going to keep it for now. Still don't like it as a single operation, but we'll deal with that another time. Push tags we're going to keep. Create head we're going to keep. It's not showing up as an error. And prune we're going to keep. So we sorted local out. Now we've got to do is put all of these onto remote. So I'm going to grab all of these. We're going to go over to our remote, chuck them in here, and we're going to swap our search around. And sadly, is there? No. There's no button here to just swap these two fields around in VS Code by the looks of it. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be a time saver. I think Sublime Text does that. Right. So local and remote should now compile, and then we go back to repo. All of these disappear. Let's make sure you've got the focus. So we need to comment all of these, and I'm surprised it's not complaining about the fact we haven't. And just to finish, we've just got to get the workspace done. And this is at the minute we're kicking this down the road a bit. It's a can we're kicking. And if this compiles, we're almost up at 2 hours, and that would be a good place to stop and talk about the problem we've got. Because doing this has determined a problem. I'm going to get rid of these, get rid of that. To be done. Remote to be done. And we're going to ignore that for now. Get remote to be done. Remote name is currently a string. Then we've got our get remote function. So in theory, this might now compile. Let's have a quick go. Right, so require branch. So there's a few Hubflow things where I've copied in the code across, but we haven't actually got a repo available. So if we go over here, repo doesn't exist. So what we need to do, let's find one where it's imported just to save time. We'll grab that. And what's our first file? Require branch. I'm sorry, I switched terminals there very quickly. That may have been too quick to actually for you to be able to see what I was doing. So what I did, slow it down, I went back to my terminal and looked at the files where I had compiler errors. And I'm using that to guide which files I need to edit. So the first one's package hubflow guarantee require branch.go. So that's where I started from. And then now we've done that, some of the others have gone red. Why they weren't red the entire time, I'm afraid I don't know. Now I'm not sure these are all going to take a repo, but they'll do for now. I just want it compiling. So our init command is now failing. There's a syntax error on line 93. So if we get our init, go up, line 93. Setting the root dir is the wrong syntax. It wants a comma. Now you're complaining. Go figure. It would be nice if the tools were a little more interactive. Cannot refer to unexported root dir. Right, so what's telling me there? That needs to be a capital R. I need to go to where it's defined. And I need to make those capitals so that we can use them. So what did I just do? Because that was a bit quick again. So in our, where we've got our compiler problem, in our init command, I changed root dir to have a capital R. It's the only way to access a property outside the package it's defined in. It's got to be a capital. That's the convention. I then move my cursor over the workspace and hit F12, which if I do it via the menus, open the menu, go to definition. And that thankfully is working with the tools. And that means that VS Code, thanks to the Golang tools, will go and find where workspace is defined for me so it can navigate around. And that's a great time saver. And if you're not familiar with a code base, it's a great archaeological tool. Just beware some programming frameworks that are powered by sprinkles and fairy dust, where this kind of traceability isn't possible. They are a bit of a problem because they require a lot of local knowledge in order to be able to work with them. Let's just trim that back down. I'm expecting some more compiler errors. Let's see how we do. Okay, multiple variable of get current working directory, get working directory in single value context. All right. I am going to clean these up. Current working directory. Don't hold this against me. So you've returned string and error. Syntax error. Unexpected new line. Expected. Trailing comma again. Right. So what I've done here is by convention, because Go doesn't have exceptions, and it doesn't matter how we feel about exceptions, it doesn't matter how I personally feel about exceptions, it's not part of the language. And so we've got to deal with what it can do. And what Go does is it returns, Go has the ability to return multiple values from a function. Some other languages can do this. Go really was one of the first to actually make this a mainstream approach. And you could argue with Python and tuples, of course, on that as well. And by convention, the second value returned is normally an error status. But if you don't care about the error status, and today, I will eventually, but today I don't care about the error status, you can assign it to the underscore. I'd have to check to be sure. I don't know if underscore's hard coded to be the trash can of variables. It's perfectly possible it's just a normal valid variable that by convention we just treat as garbage and throw away. It's perfectly possible. So that's what I did. Because get working directory returns both string and an error, I have to assign it to a variable separately before I can use it in initializing my workspace structure. Arguably, there's pros and cons with that, with the way Golang forces you to work. On the one hand, it would be nice to just have the code a little bit more compact and just be able to do get working directory. Does it ever fail? The fact it returns an error suggests there's a possibility it fails. I'm not sure what those circumstances are. But that's also the advantage about Golang. Because it's so consistent in its approach, it kind of forces us to be a little bit better with our error handling and a little less happy path. So once you get used to it, it's fine. I think I still prefer exceptions because they don't rely on people checking return values. But Go's made it work. Go has made it work. Right, our other compiler errors. That's interesting. Why is this one complaining? Because it's format. Let's turn that to our new one. Helpers.warn. I'll get rid of that. We don't need standard error because we deal with that. So the compiler error is now the fact that I'm calling functions that either don't exist or don't return values yet. So I'm going to leave that alone for tonight. That's something I might fix off camera before next week. We'll see how much time I get during the week. Right. So the question is, those of you who have watched through this far, is have you spotted the problem we've got at the code base? Let me explain. And to do that, I'm going back to iPad cam for a moment. Here one. iPad. There we go. Right, so iPad cam. What's the problem? This diagram isn't quite right, is the first problem. Let me highlight. So we've said here, is that not working? My Apple Pencil's decided to pack up. So if you look at the Git abstraction layer, just to the right of our glass wall, we've said that our local and remote workspaces hide behind our Git abstraction layer. But that's not really true. The structures we're evolving and the approach we're taking means that our local and remote workspaces are much more going to be the main abstractions that the workspace talks to. And we're actually going to hide our Git versions behind those. But we haven't, in all the code I've done over the last couple of weeks, the actual hiding of the Git version hasn't happened once. Not yet. I wish hang on a moment, let me just change, right, let me just change cameras. Right, I'm just going to try and get the iPad Apple Pencil working so I can actually draw on this diagram, because I'd feel a lot better. I just want to find out, is the battery gone flat? Shouldn't have done. Oh, right, the Apple Pencil's gone flat. That's not going to work tonight. There's no point continuing with that. What I want to do with the diagram is I want to move the Git abstraction layer to the far right-hand side of the diagram. That's what I want to do. And I want to change it so that the workspaces are much more butting up against the glass, the glass wall that hides the workspaces. Our local and our remote repos, they're the abstraction that workspaces are going to access. So our Git versions, we're going to move further around to the far right hand side. That's what we're going to do. So I will get my Apple Pencil charged. Sorry about it going flat. These things happen. And then I'll redo the diagram. And that begs another question. Let's go to full cam. Is it time for us to sit down and take that diagram and convert it from a hand sketch to something that's like on a slide perhaps, or done via draw.io or Lucidcharts, one of those, or a proper diagramming tool? Is it time to do that? I mean, our architecture so far is holding up. I want to move some things around on our diagram for sure, but I'm not looking to make wholesale deletions and additions at this point. So I think that's what I'll probably do. And you don't want to see me drawing diagrams, I'm sure. So I will probably do that off camera, ready for next week. So, where are we with things? Let's go back to what we were trying to do today. Let's go back to my slides. And here we go. I said I wanted to work on the non-interactive init command, and we've made a dent in that. It's only a dent, but we have made a dent in that. And the reason I was doing that was to build out the workspace abstraction. And I think we're certainly getting that tonight. I think we've certainly made the workspace abstraction and the repo abstraction are feeling stronger tonight. I'm not yet going to say they're validated until we've got code executing. We're not quite there, but we're getting there. Now the other thing we've done, I think, I've just had a thought about how we can keep the diagram the same. I'll come back to that in a moment. The other thing we've done is we've started to flesh out the business logic, the Hubflow abstraction a bit more as well, which wasn't on tonight's topics, and it should have been. Up front, it should have been obvious that would have been one of the things we'd have been fleshing out tonight. So next week, what we're going to do, we're going to carry on with this process, and we're going to see how close we can get to getting the non-interactive init command working. That's what we're going to do. Now, just to finish off, coming back to the diagram, I said it doesn't need to change. I'll explain why. And let me just... Sorry. You have to plug the Apple Pencil into the iPad's lightning port in order to charge it, which is useless because you need being plugged into the lightning port to actually act as iPad cam. Apple. They do have some blind spots. Right. Just very quickly back to the diagram to finish. Do I have enough back? Oh, we're going to just about get away with this. The reason this can stay here, it's just occurred to me, is the workspace can create the get abstraction layer and then pass it as a parameter into our local and our remote abstractions. The get abstraction layer is a structure in its own right. So we can, when we initialize the workspace, it can go and find Git and create the get abstraction layer structure, and we'll hide that behind an interface. And then it can pass that as a parameter whenever we are performing an operation on local and remote workspaces. So the diagram can actually stay put. That's a stroke of luck. That's not deliberate. But that actually makes a lot of sense. So that's what we'll do. All right. We've been streaming tonight for about 2 hours, 10 minutes, give or take. What do you think? How's tonight gone? If you're watching this live or you're watching this on catch up, either way, and you've made it this far, please do leave a comment. Please let me know what you thought. All feedback is very welcome. What do you think to the project? About how we're moving this forward step by step? Have you spotted a problem with the approach I'm taking that I haven't yet spotted? If you have, do let me know. Second pair of eyes is often very handy in spotting things that the primary programmer's not spotting because they've got their heads down in it too much. If you are enjoying the series, as always, please do leave a like on YouTube and subscribe. It helps us out because it tells the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people, which is what I want to do. I mean, I'd be doing this work even if there was no viewers. But the reason I want viewers, especially live viewers, is because this feedback is like having a live code review. As we get through the code, it will help us make the Gitflow extension the best it possibly can be. No matter how experienced I am, no matter how good I am or aren't, a second pair of eyes can always improve my code. Very much so with this project. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you same time next week for episode 10.